Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. We are playing through version 1.00 of the Japanese release, and last time we took care of a number of loose ends. We got a bunch of dialogues, we went back and we paid a visit to Dura, and we got a bunch of dialogues from him, ended up in a little bit of an altercation, a little bit of a scrap. Got our revenge by killing him. He tried to talk us out of it, but he was not successful. Then came down here, got some revenge on these people, got the dialogues from the people in the houses who want to be blessed with blood, talked to Imposter Yusefka, right? So we've gathered a bunch of information on the translation, all that sort of thing, powered ourselves up, talked about the Rune Workshop tool, so now we have access to runes, and now, finally, we've made our way, we've put it off long enough, it's time for us to enter the Grand Cathedral. But before we do that, I want to spend a little bit of time to review, because this is one of the things I want to focus on in this playthrough, because I think it's interesting. And I want to go over sort of the reasoning behind what's gotten us here, right? The guidance that the game has put in place, in theory, again, this is sort of hidden away stuff, but if you focus on it, you can sort of make it work. And so that's what I want to try and do. I want to focus on it, I want to try and make it work. And I want to think about a path through the game that makes sense, that gives us motivation the entire time for what we're doing and why we're here visiting the Grand Cathedral now. And so I want to sort of focus on the main points to that, and it's going to be complicated, right? So I've got some notes. I've never done this before, but I don't want to miss any of these many threads, so if you notice any, like, weird pauses, I'll do my best to edit around them, but that's what's happening, right? Because I want to go over, I want to think about the reasoning and go through all these things, right? So as far as I can tell, as far as I see it, there are sort of two main things that drive us to the main cathedral. There's the personal aspect of things, the personal thread, and there's the hunter aspect of things, the hunter thread. And they're a little bit intertwined, I've talked about it before, but first, let's start with the personal, because that's the easiest way to understand it, right? We wake up at the beginning of the game, and there's a note in our hand saying, seek Paleblood to transcend the hunt. So our character is very motivated to find Paleblood. It seems to be, actually, even before that note, right? The line from the blood minister who gives us the initial transfusion, oh yes, Paleblood, sounds like it could be in response to our character saying, hey, do you know about Paleblood, right? And that they cut the, hey, do you know about Paleblood part? Oh yes, Paleblood, right? You've come to the right place. Yharnam's the home of blood administration. You want to learn about blood. You know, we've got what you need here. And in order to gain access, though, you're just going to need a little bit of our blood. And blood transfusion, everything goes crazy. But we wake up, we find this note that's, I guess, some sort of reminder to ourselves that our goal, seek Paleblood, end or transcend the hunt. And with that in mind, we start asking people around Yharnam. Eventually we find Gilbert. He says, look, I don't know what Paleblood is, but if you want to, it sounds like that's a weird type of blood, and if you want to know about weird types of blood, go to the Grand Cathedral, right? You want to get into the Cathedral Ward and talk to some high-ups in the Healing Church, go to the Grand Cathedral, essentially. And there's a little bit of complication as to how we get there, but eventually we do, and we come here, and we can talk to people in the Grand Cathedral. And also, his version of events is also sort of corroborated to a certain extent by Alfred, who says, hey, yeah, Healing Church, they know all about blood healing. If that's what you're interested, go there, visit the Grand Cathedral, ask your questions, essentially. And so that's it. That's very simple, right? Our personal thread, we want to go here because we want to learn about Paleblood, and maybe someone in here will know about Paleblood. Things get a little bit more complicated when we get over to what I call the hunter thread. And we're first introduced to this in the sense that we find a note in the hunter's dream, and it tells us that we've been trapped by the hunter's dream, actually. And if we want to escape, we need to stop the source of the spreading scourge of beasts. So whatever is causing all this, we need to hunt it down and stop it, and that will free us from the dream and let us get on with our everyday lives, essentially, right? So that's sort of where, when I was talking about how the personal overlaps a little bit, right? We don't want to be trapped by the dream. That sounds like a bad idea. We don't want to be trapped by the dream forever. We don't want this night to go on endlessly. So if we want to escape, we've got to find out what's going on and put a stop to it. So how do we start to gather that information? Well, we can notice some things about our interactions and things that are going on in the world, right? So some of the earliest indications, we've got Gehrman, our advisor, Gehrman, tells us, hey, the moon's close. It's going to be a long hunt tonight. So something of a throwaway remark, but it does maybe start to get us thinking. The proximity of the moon has some relation to the effect of the hunt, right? The status of the hunt. And we also learn from a very early note in Central Yharnam, as we're running around, that people are thinking, oh, this sort of is like Old Yharnam all over again, right? The Old Yharnam incident where everybody turned into beasts, and it was this terrible disaster, right? Where people had to get, like, burned in their houses and hunted down. There was all sorts of nastiness that was going on with Old Yharnam, right? And this is that all over again, right? It's just the same as that moonlit night. So once again, we're seeing a tie to the moon and the spreading beasts. And if that was too abstract, we get to Old Yharnam itself, and there's a note that basically just says, the red moon is hanging low, and now beasts are everywhere, right? So we're getting yet another bit of information that's telling us the proximity of the moon, and in particular a red moon, is an indication that beasts are going to be running all around the streets. So if we want to stop this spreading scourge of beasts, we got to do something about that moon getting closer to us. Well, how do we stop the moon being so close? Well, this is where we find out that, we get hit by this kidnapper, we get dragged off to this ward, we find out from another note that there's this secret ritual that's taking place, and it's summoning the moon. So the moon is being called closer, and that's causing the proliferation of the plague of beasts. So if we want to stop that, we got to stop this ritual. But in order to stop the ritual, we need to stop it from being hidden. We have to reveal the ritual. How do we reveal the ritual? Well, we have an indication how it's being hidden, right? We found another note in the cathedral ward, in Erden Chapel, essentially, where we find out that there's this thing called the Byrgenwerth spider, and it's hiding all rituals. Any ritual that's taking place, the Byrgenwerth spider is preventing it from being perceived. So it sounds like if we want to uncover this ritual in order to put a stop to it, and eventually, right, free ourselves from the dream, because that will presumably stop the spreading scourge of beasts, as we need to do, we need to get to this Byrgenwerth spider and deal with it, right? That's our goal. And we don't know anything about Byrgenwerth in this theoretical scenario that I'm concocting. So what do? We ask around again, we talk to Alfred, say, hey, what's this Byrgenwerth place? And Alfred tells us, the Healing Church has declared that place, Byrgenwerth, forbidden ground, even though essentially everything sacred in Yharnam can be traced back there. He also tells us that Byrgenwerth is a school. It lies in this tangled wood, and only scholars know the password to get past the gate guard. Well, what gate guard? What's he talking about? We start running around, right? We run around, explore the cathedral ward. We eventually find, hey, there's this gate, and there's this guy guarding it who insists on us giving him a password. And, okay, now we found the gate that seems to lead into these woods where Byrgenwerth is, where the spider is that we need to stop in order to reveal the ritual, to stop the calling of the moon, to stop the spreading of beasts, to free ourselves from the dream. Oh, this gets so complicated. Anyway, but how do we find out that password? Well, we find another note. We do a bunch of exploration, and we find out that if we want to find out the password, guess what? We have to come to the Grand Cathedral, right? The sacred adage passed down by the people who are head of the Grand Cathedral, sacred adage passed down through generations, is the password that will allow the gate guard to be appeased, right? That will grant us access to the Forbidden Woods. So that's why, as a hunter, we're here at the Grand Cathedral. We want to get this adage, this passed down saying, so that we can get into the woods, so that we can get to Byrgenwerth and stop this spider and reveal the ritual, and then find out, once we've revealed it, have to figure out what to do to put a stop to it. Stop, therefore, the calling of the moon and the proliferation of the beasts, and then we'll be freed from the dream. So, as far as I can tell, those are all the threads that are leading us here. And again, let me know if I've left out anything, if I've missed out on any of that stuff. That's all going to become relevant very soon, because after I open these doors, we're sort of going to get another piece of the puzzle. And this is This next piece of the puzzle's a little bit perplexing to me. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, so I'll bring it up. Hey, it's another note, right? These notes turn out to be like the main path that drive you through the game. And, ironically enough, they were added very late, from what I recall, in development. And therefore, the translation was maybe a little bit less than ideal on some of them. I think, if I remember my past research correctly, it's something like there's this 2-week window, and they were just making every last possible change to the text. Anyway, let's take a look at this note, and I'll explain why I think some weird stuff might be going on. We'll see. All right. Inheritor of the secret ritual of blood. Principal one of blood charity. Right? Blood charity is sort of one of the ways they talk about blood administration in the Japanese. And by the way, this is, I was talking before about elevated address and how, subject plus yo in Japanese is sort of a form of elevated address. That's the form that this is in, right? We're getting two, like a double descriptor of the same person, right? So it's sort of like, O ye who inherit the secret ritual of blood, ye who are chief of blood charity. And those two things are the same thing, right? So the secret ritual inheritor and the main person in blood offering is the same person that's getting this elevated dress. That's like the subject of this note. So this is sort of an internal thing to someone in the healing church who it seems like grammatically is an important person. Okay, next section here. Touch the holy covering of the altar and carve Master Lawrence's adage into your body, right? I think your flesh is the official translation, and that sort of fits the elevated tone, right? So here's the weird thing. The holy covering of the altar that we're supposed to touch, like seigai for holy covering is sort of a made-up word, right? It's not an existing concept in Japanese. It's taking the kanji for holy and the kanji for lid or covering, and it's putting them together. And we'll eventually, probably later on in this episode, get to it, but it's not exactly what we do. We don't touch a covering on the altar to get some information. We touch something else. So this is the thing that I'm a little bit unsure of. Is it that this note being aimed at people in the healing church has been sort of corrupted over time, right? Maybe they think what you do is you touch the sacred covering and you carve the adage into your flesh, and that's how it works. And it's sort of ceremonial. It's become ceremonial, and the true meaning of the ritual is lost. Or this could be interpreted just as a straightforward, another additional piece of the puzzle for the player, where you get to the Grand Cathedral and you're like, okay, I know I need to find out this adage. How do I find it out? Oh, the adage of the Grand Cathedral? You do that by touching the sacred covering on the altar. And it's as straightforward as that, right? It's the last link in the puzzle that says, you're looking for an adage, well, this is where you find it. And I would be inclined to accept that fully if it weren't for something else that we get. But before we get it, we have to fight a boss. And before we fight the boss, we need to talk about some of the dialogue that's going on in the background. And you can't hear it yet. I don't want to go too close. All right.
And feast upon the old blood. Seek the old blood. Let us pray, let us wish to partake in communion. Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood. Our thirst for blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood. But beware, the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. The foul beasts will dangle nectar and lure the meek into the depths. Remain wary of the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. Were it not for fear, death would go unlamented. Blood. But beware.
Okay.
The frailty of
So,
men.
hopefully I've taken some time in editing to find the right cycle for that dialogue and have it make sense. But it's an interesting thing that figure up there at the altar is just chanting. And notably, the phrase that this person is employing is seek the old blood. Now, I'm not going to do it, but if we were to like run and go to the gate guard and bring up the password prompt, we still haven't learned the password, right? Nothing in that chant is the password, is the adage. So it seems like the adage has been like forgotten over time, right? I'm a little bit preemptive on this, but remember that sort of phrasing. And also another thing to point out just in general, right? There are no subtitles for that chant. It's purely in the background, and you sort of have to notice it, and in order to understand it, you have to speak English, right? So this is the Japanese version of the game. Remember, all of this stuff, this is the default experience of Bloodborne for a Japanese player. They could go up and hear that whole chant and not have any idea what was being said. There's no subtitles anywhere, right? I think that's an interesting story presentation choice. Now, of course, there was Japanese written, right, that would presumably have been the original that then the translators took and put into the voiced lines that the voice actors delivered, and that's how all of this is happening. But it's interesting to me that in the presentation of the game, in the game's default presentation, you're just listening to those lines, right? If you're a Japanese player, you're just listening to those lines and being like, ah, yes, a ritual is happening, right? Like, this is church. This is some sort of church service. That's probably the extent of the information that you could glean from that. And obviously, like now, and especially if you speak English, right, it's more interesting than that. But I think that's just a fascinating way to present an experience, right? It'd be like, running in here and there's this thing that's just constantly cycling in Latin, right? And people would eventually figure out, oh, what does all this Latin mean, right? And they'd work it out, and people would think, oh, this is so cool, all this deep hidden meaning, right? That's essentially the experience a Japanese player would be having, right? Because they would have to find out what the Japanese script for that background set of dialogues even is. So I just think that's cool. And I think that's worth noting in a celebration of so many years of this game. But let's take another step forward now and see what happens to this person. Well, it looks like we won't be asking Vicar Amelia here about what's going on with the blood. Oh boy, I needed that, let me tell you. I needed that. All that, keeping everything straight, going over all of the different threads to keep in our head, and then just running in and getting destroyed by that boss. Oh, beautiful. Allows me to refocus on just running around and, getting revenge like we got last time. Oh, just so much so much easier for me to deal with the playing of a video game than it is trying to make sense of it. All these arcane mysteries of Bloodborne. And of course, as I've just inadvertently demonstrated, all the dangers along the way, we can pretty easily run past them. So I'm not actually super worried. And of course, we don't get a repeat of that cutscene from before, right? She's just already transformed now, and she remains transformed. And we get to see the cool thing with her sort of howling, right? Oops, mistimed it. Just a little bit late on that. All right, there's my bloodstain. That's what I was after. Okay. Now, let's just have a little bit of fun. Not worry too much. There we go. I need to be a little bit earlier that time. Not worry too much about all of the stuff that's going on with fighting or deep lore or anything like that. Let's go for the limb breaks. Uh-oh. Not let our stamina get too low. Oop, too slow. Am I going to die again? No. No, thankfully my positioning saved my life. Not that time. That time I positioned myself directly in front of her fist. I'm going for her limbs in the hope that I will eventually break them again. Possibly get an opening for another visceral. Uh-oh. Something to note. Is she going to do the... Nope. Nope, that's the jump. Something to note, she constantly keeps that one limb. You know, me talking about going for limb breaks. There's... I swear you can get a visceral off of that. I don't know why I'm not getting it. I'll deal with it, though. I'll survive. There's one limb that she's constantly keeping close to her heart there, that you can sort of see if you're paying close attention. And it's the same one where she was sort of grasping that pendant, right? So this is this cool aspect of the boss where she is just desperately clinging to the last shreds of her humanity, right? It's a constant struggle for her. It's a constant struggle for her to maintain that humanity, maintain that control that she's lost. Oh boy, I rolled right into that jump. Actually, maybe I want to give her some space. Because there's something that she can do. Oh boy. Maybe she'll do it now. Now that she's glowing. Maybe it's just the effect of the lighting, though. Looks like a grab. Yeah, that was a grab. I don't think it's worth it. She can actually heal herself, which is totally appropriate for, you know, a boss in the healing church, right? Very cool. And this is the other thing that I was looking to get here, this gold pendant. So this is also another difference between the various English releases and also the Japanese release of the game, is the guidance that you get on this particular pendant, right? So we have the gold pendant, a very straightforward translation of the title. And first line here, the pendant of Vicar Amelia. And so literally, if you translate the Japanese, it's like head of church ward, right? And I think, if I remember correctly, I'll have to verify this. I'll put it up on the screen in editing. But I think kyoku is like a parish, right? So I think technically this could be like head of parish Amelia. And I think there might be some equivalent version of like the thing that you could do in Japanese. But interestingly, the official translators choose the term vicar, which is not like a super high rank in the Catholic Church. It seems to be the head of the healing church, but there's just the one like church district, right? Because if you're literal, the church ward, the church district is the thing that Amelia here is the head of, and that's like the healing church in the cathedral ward, right? So she's the head of this whole organization, but it's still just one district in one city. And so vicar is sort of possibly an appropriate way of getting across that idea. Been a little while since I did that research, so I'll need to verify some of it, but I'm pretty sure that's the idea, right? Head of the healing church, but the healing church is just a small place in the rundown, forgotten city of Yarnum, right? Because this is another thing from like the background lore, is Yharnam's this old place out in the mountains that nobody really pays much attention to, but they do have this one like mystery blood that you can go and get, right? And it's supposed to be this panacea that cures everything. So that's sort of getting at the idea of at the same time the grandeur and at the same time the comparative like low level status of an organization like the Healing Church. And I think that was a wise move on the part of the translators to make this Vicar Amelia. But that's sort of a bit of a side point. The main point that I want to get to is at the end of the description, but we'll get there eventually. So let's see. By means of use, it becomes a blood gem, which is used to strengthen weapons. Okay, that is also a symbol of the adage passed down for generations among the vicars, who are the heads of the Healing Church, right? So once again, we're sort of verifying the sort of positional thing, right? The vicars, the kyokuchos, are the heads of the Healing Church. And at the passed down through the generations, there is this gold pendant, which symbolizes, it is not itself, but it symbolizes the words that are passed on. So we have like a physical keepsake that is a reminder of the adage, right? The words that are passed down among generations. If you wish to know that, right, presumably the words, the adage, touch the skull on the altar. And I noted that this is a difference in the different English versions. The U.S. English version, or the North American release, right, talks about opening the gates of Byrgenwerth, right? Like if you want to know the adage, words that will open the gates of Byrgenwerth, something to that effect. I think that's a remnant of the game's direction from before they put the notes in the game. So before they had another note to tell you that the adage that opens the gate is the words that open the gate is the adage that's passed down to the Grand Cathedral, you needed to find that out from this item. Now they have a note in the world to take care of that, and instead that frees up the possibility, as you see in the Japanese and also the UK English, to learn the adage, touch the altar skull, right? So this is another point where the direction through the game sort of suffers from a remnant of a past translation that got preserved in the North American release, I think, right? That's my speculation as to what happened. I don't actually know the details, but that would be my guess. And of course, once again, UK English version seems to be just a little bit more up to date, a little bit better at guiding players through the game. But this is also the thing that makes me think maybe that note to the immediate right by the entrance of the Grand Cathedral is indicating that there's been some decay in understanding over time. Because here's the thing, right? If you look at sort of the center of the last line, there was the word zugai, which is the Japanese word for skull, right? The skull, the altar skull, the word skull is sort of the prominent thing there. And what's the noticeable thing about that? The guy in zugai is the same guy, this is a weird thing to say in English, that is the guy in seigai, right? So the holy covering that you're supposed to like lay your hand on and inscribe the words of Lawrence upon your flesh, right? The holy covering in Japanese is only one character away from the skull, right? And I'll put this up on the screen in editing so it's easier to see to an English speaker, right? There's only one character difference. We've switched from zugai to seigai. And I think maybe sort of the new point of that note is to demonstrate how the church has sort of lost touch with its own, say, sort of like this game of telephone across the generations, right? The original message has become somewhat garbled. It's no longer about touching the skull. They've still got the physical keepsake, and a hunter, like as you read this description, will know from the physical keepsake that you need to touch the skull. But if you're just going on the instructions passed down in the Healing Church, they talk about touching the holy covering, as opposed the holy covering of the altar, as opposed to the skull of the altar. So maybe I really don't know about this interpretation. It's a genuine point of like ambiguity for me. But I think possibly you could take that understanding away from it, because one thing that you can't really argue with is that the words that Vicar Amelia was chanting don't seem to line up with the actual adage that we're interested in. And the gold pendant has just told us how to get the adage that we're interested in. We need to touch that skull. Also, if you did none of that, if you haven't paid any attention to anything, boy, it sure looks like there's a very important item inside that skull, right? So we're going to touch the skull on the altar. Oh, before we do that, though, before I forget, right? We've heard something else from Alfred. We've heard a few different things from Alfred that I wanted to revisit, right? Except Gameplay Matt didn't do a great job of recalling them. So now I have to step in and clarify things. Anyway, Alfred tells us that a group of those who once studied at Byrgenwerth went down into the Tomb of the Gods and came back one day with the holy substance of communion. He also says he's heard that the holy substance, origin of the church's blood-based salvation, is venerated in the Grand Cathedral. So here's a freeze frame of the big shrine for you to draw your own conclusions about that. As to what I think, I feel like I've already as good as said that I believe the holy medium is the special blood from the Chalice dungeons, but I'll let Gameplay Matt elaborate. Here's what I think. I think that up there, we're seeing the pouring out of the blood, and that is the thing that sort of symbolizes all the rest. Now, I am not versed in iconography. I've been, disclaiming all credit to visual expertise in storytelling in this game. So I could be dead wrong about this, but I think it makes the most sense, and I realize this is incredibly boring, but I think it makes the most sense that they found, these scholars of Byrgenwerth found a substance in the tombs, and it was old blood, and that's enshrined in the altar because we have this person who's providing and all these other people who wish to receive and all these things, and then there's the skull on the altar that's sort of strategically placed underneath it to highlight the central role, right? There's all this stuff that's going on, but I think the heart of it is the blood. And again, I could be wrong. That's just sort of my take. And I think that a little bit of that ambiguity as to the source of the substance is still at play, right? So I can't say this 100%. I can say what I believe. I can lay out the evidence in front of you. You can make up your own mind, right? And that's sort of why I wanted to come back to this, and why I also wanted to emphasize I don't talk about visual interpretations. Visual interpretations, I mean, sometimes they can be clear, but a lot of the times they can just be vague. Because there's nothing to tell you what they are. There's too much information. Anyway, again, make up your own mind about that. I'm going to follow some instructions. We're going to get a very important cutscene. We're going to find out a little bit more. We're going to actually learn the adage.
Master Willem, I've come to bid you farewell.
Oh, I know. You think now to betray me.
No, but you will never listen. I tell you, I will not forget our adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open.
Fear the old blood. I must take my leave.
By the gods, fear it, Lawrence.
Whew, oh boy, what a trip that was, huh? This is the thing, right? Fear the old blood is the adage. That's the saying that should have been passed down. What was Vicar Amelia saying? Seek the old blood. It's like the literal opposite, right? And there's a character in the DLC, I think it's Adeline. She sort of offhandedly makes this phrase that's maybe sort of the middle stage of this, historical game of telephone where the wires may have been crossed, right? And maybe the reason the wires were crossed was because not everybody can draw the memory out of a relic the way a hunter can, right? Remember how I was talking all about how hunters, they draw things out of the dead, and the old hunter bone, right? You gain strength from the remains of an old hunter. Somehow you're able to gain access to the lost art of quick-stepping, or whatever the actual term is, by using the old hunter bone. And you've got this relic that is this skull. You're a hunter. You can gain access to things from it. And so you're in a unique position to find out the adage that has actually been forgotten over time, right? They mean to have passed down this phrase, but it's sort of gotten garbled in generational telephone, and we need to go straight to the source in order to actually learn the adage. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe it's not that complicated. Maybe, the Vicars of the Healing Church can touch and access the skull's memory, and this is the holy covering on the altar, and they do learn the correct adage, and something else explains what's going on with the garbled saying, right? The whole seek the old blood thing. I don't know how that happened, how that came about. Maybe they're deceiving people. I really don't know what the other explanations are. That's sort of why I'm considering this alternative, that maybe we have a direct line to the past where others maybe don't, is because I don't fully understand how it could have been garbled, how that message could have been sort of missed otherwise. But anyway, there's that. There are also a few other interesting things to talk about that cutscene, right? One of the things that people were first talking about when people found out about that cutscene, they looked at the subtitles. So actually, two things. First of all, I noticed in that cutscene, the subtitles have since been updated. The subtitles that we saw, if I remember correctly, I will verify this in editing because I don't want to get this wrong. But if I remember correctly, the subtitles that we saw in the cutscene from 1.00 talked about how we are made human by the blood, become more than human by the blood, and lose our humanity by the blood. And here's the thing. That is an old version of the Japanese that has since been patched out of the game. Now, the Japanese subtitles much better match the English phrasing of, we are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood, if I remember that correctly. So, that's interesting to see, right? That as late as version 1.00, they were still getting the Japanese text in order to properly display in the game for the story. So, that's not like the central point here, but it was something I thought was worth commenting on. The thing that I wanted to bring up first was one of the things that people started talking about when this game, they started digging into the translation, was they found out that in the subtitles, there is this particle mo, right? So, kimi mo urageru daro, or something to that effect, right? So you too will betray me, right? I think the official line is just, you think now to betray me. And the Japanese subtitle says, you too are betraying me. Well, who else is betraying Master Willem? Did they cut that out of the game? I think they sort of did. So I have a like weird translator theory, a weird sort of game dev history theory, and I can't verify it. I don't know how. So this is just going to be pure speculation. Take or leave this for what you think it's worth. But I suspect what happened was they had a voiced line. And you can find this in cut content. You can find this alternate version where the voiced line is, you think now as Gehrman did to betray me. And now the line is, you think now to betray me. So what I think happened is they took the long version of the line and they just snipped out the audio of that central section. I think they had the line, you think now as Gehrman did to betray me, and they were like, okay, now let's cut that part in the middle because we changed our mind about how much we want to tell the players. You think now to betray me. And, if you're doing a good job editing, I imagine they had a clean enough take where they could just cut out that central section, and they could leave the Japanese. Here's the thing. They could leave the Japanese the same, right? They could leave that mo in there in the Japanese, just snip out Gehrman's name, and then the Japanese implies, so you also think to betray me now. And it doesn't specify who the other person is. So a Japanese speaker will see the subtitles and they will think, Lawrence is betraying Master Willem, and he is one of at least, there is at least one other betrayal that's happened, possibly more, right? Because they don't know that it might be a reference to Garamond. They don't know that it's not several people. It could be several people are betraying him, and Lawrence is just the latest one, right? All the Mo tells you is that, in addition, Lawrence, in addition, is betraying. So that's sort of my, like, unjustifiable, as far as I know, theory, is that they wanted to cut out the specific information about Garamond, and because of the way they did it, and because it happened so late, they couldn't re-record the English line to get in that nuance of, you too think now to betray me, right? They just couldn't do it, so they cut down the line that they had, they cut out the part about Garamond, and as a result, they lost a little bit from the translation, because it doesn't have that idea of Mo that the Japanese subtitle still has. And I think maybe that's just what they did. Anyway, again, like I said, take that for what it's worth. It might be worth nothing. It's just random, behind-the-scenes sausage-making sort of theory. More front and center is the phrasing around the adage itself. And by this point, Gameplay Matt's brain is too frazzled to make this point well. So once again, I'm jumping in during editing to help sort things out. Now, before we get to the adage itself, here's something you need to realize about the lines leading up to it. In English, every time we see the Japanese subtitle use the word chi, or blood, the English translation adds the definitive article the to it. So this isn't just any blood, it's the blood. Why isn't the Japanese specifying this too? Well, quite simply because Japanese doesn't have articles like English. For this reason, I've been leaving them out of my translations, but if we can trust that the official translators were working in close communication with the developers on these voiced lines, then this small detail is about to make a big difference. That's because of some ambiguity surrounding the word kanete in Japanese. The main thing you need to know is that it's not a simple adjective that means old. Here are some example sentences I found online so you can sort of get a sense for the term from context. In the first example, we're seeing the idea of kanete show up as a way of saying that, for a long time now, I've been hearing your name. In the second, it's conveying the idea that the trip in question has been planned in advance. Similarly, in the third example, it's what conveys the idea of the speaker's desire having been held for a long time. To me, its association with the past is more like the word beforehand than old. I've heard your name beforehand. His trip was planned beforehand. My desire from beforehand. These aren't perfect replacements, especially since beforehand doesn't carry the same idea of a thing stretching back across time into the past, but I think it works as a rough approximation. So, having established that, let's return to Bloodborne and consider without any other context whether beforehand should be modifying just the word blood or the whole sentence. That is, should this be understood as fear blood from beforehand, which is pretty much interchangeable with fear the old blood, or should it be understood as from beforehand fear blood, which I might rephrase into something like be ever wary of blood? Seems like a difficult question to answer, right? Well, this is where the previous usage of the definitive article the comes back into the picture. Because if we understand this idea of it being a specific kind of blood, as revealed by the rules of English grammar, then our choices suddenly become either fear the blood from beforehand, or from beforehand, fear the blood, which both amount to pretty much the same thing as fear the old blood. Now, I can't say for certain that this detail was approved by the developers, even though it was present in the translation of both the old and new versions of the preceding voiced lines. After all, though I believe the voiceover script had more developer involvement than the text-based translations, we have heard mistakes creep into the voiced lines, such as Garamond's faulty advice to ascend to Erden Chapel. But for my part, I trust that the translators got this most crucial of lines correct. Frankly, given the way the phrase has spread through the Bloodborne community over the years, I think the official translators knocked this one out of the park. But before I hand things back to Gameplay Matt, there is one potential double meaning at play in the Japanese that I wanted to point out. That would be the use of the verb osoreru in the Japanese subtitles, because while this word does broadly mean to fear, it's also the term that's been employed by Japanese Christians when translating the biblical phrase, fear the Lord your God. So there's a sense in which we can understand this warning against that special blood as including a hint of the idea that it should be accorded reverence. Given Master Willem's general distaste for blood, though, I've never been sure quite how much to read into this. Anyway, that's more than enough from me. Come on, gameplay Matt, take us home. The important thing is, now we know the adage, fear the old blood. I'm sticking with it. You do what you want. And we're going to use that adage to open the doors that will grant us access to Byrgenwerth, which lays behind the Forbidden Woods. But before we do that, we're going to go back to the Hunter's Dream. Right. I have got a bunch of leveling up to do, and I knew I wanted to do it. I've got 27,000 blood echoes just lying around. We have to solve that problem. So I knew I was going to do it anyway, and I needed I needed an excuse to just give myself a break. This episode has gone very long. It's been very big, sort of as I feared. But hopefully everything that I've said has sort of made sense, has lined up reasonably well with people's understandings of the game. And yeah. Next time, we will look to finally make some actual progress instead of just, spending the entire time in the Grand Cathedral. Boy, this turned into an episode. And yeah, next time we'll look forward, we'll get ourselves back on track, spend some blood echoes, head into the Forbidden Woods, just get back to hunting a few beasts. But until then, I'm going to call an end to my hunt for the evening, and I wish all of you good hunting.